it's Wesley with 22 Zines, and welcome to the inaugural video of Zines for Greenhorns. This is a project that has been a long time in the making, and I'm at the point where I just gotta do it and get it out there. Basically, the whole idea is to make the guide that I would have wanted to have when I first started making zines. Because one thing that I love this about the zine community and zine culture is it is very trial and error. It is very focused on just like getting in there and doing it yourself and giving it a try and learning things that way, which I think is fantastic. I also think that that can be a little bit intimidating for some people if they really genuinely have no idea where to start. Then just saying, oh, we'll just try to make something it feels like it doesn't give enough of a grip to grab onto to start going with it. So I basically am going to be sharing my knowledge, tips, and tricks about zines and zine making that I have gained and developed over many years of doing so. I started making zines when I was about 13, I think, 12 or 13. So I've had a lot of experience in it. And I want to share this in a way that is hopefully helpful for you. These videos are basically going to be a audio-visual version of the zine making guide that I have on my website, 22zines.com. I have a zine making guide that's basically a written version of what I'm going to be talking through here. So if you like having something to refer back to, if you like having notes, if you like things in a written format, you can also access that. I will have a link below. And also, as you're going through, please don't feel obligated to take any of this as the official word. I don't mean to purport myself as the seminal zine expert or anything like that. I absolutely encourage you to go ahead and learn your own things through trial and error, to experiment, to break any of the suggestions I put through here. There's no rules, there's no anything like that. But as I was saying before, I hope that this provides you with enough of a foundation, enough of a grip to get going on your zine journey. This video is part 1, which is focusing really on the basics. We're going to cover briefly what is a zine, a little bit about zine history and zine culture, some of the ethos that you see behind zines, as well as some common subjects of zines and the way that I tend to like to categorize zine subjects in my mind. So that's really what this one's going to be focusing on. Future videos will basically go through the zine making process from inspiration to creation, to setting it up for print, to printing, to ultimately distributing. But here we are at part 1, so let's do that first. Hurry up. Naturally, the first question that many people have, and if you start getting into making zines, the question that you're going to have to answer a million times over is, what is a zine? And this, as these sorts of things often do, doesn't have a super clear answer. In fact, it's a prompt for a community event called International Zine Month in July. Much of the time, there's a prompt that is something along the lines of create your own definition of what is a zine. And so there's lots of things that you could get into it, and the issue with any definition is that it's inevitably going to feel like it excludes some things that could fall under that category. So try not to take this definition that I'm about to give too literally or too strongly as like, this is exactly what a zine is. I'm more just giving you kind of the common sense definition, the one that is easiest to share and explain briefly what a zine is. And then as we go through and talk a little bit more about the history and the culture, you'll have a bit more grounding about some of what goes behind zines. But basically, to start with, zine, I am taking this is a little handout thing that I made at one point many years ago. Zines are small batch DIY publications. They are usually cheaply made with plain old paper, staples, and heart. The content can be anything: drawings, collage, photos, text. Anything you can photocopy can be in a zine. Although even that's not a rule, some zines today are all digital. A zine can be a personal newsletter or diary, an underground newspaper, a piece of art, or all of the above and so much more. Zines can be collaborative or individually produced, physically or digitally made, and kept personal or shared with the world. Zines are often photocopied and distributed at zine fests or art events, online, or through the mail. The best thing about zines, you don't need any special materials, instructions, or skills. All you need is a paper, a pen, and your own voice. Everyone has a voice. Put it on paper. So, clearly in this guide, I am encouraging people to make their own zines. And honestly, I think that is the easiest way to really understand what a zine is and understand zine culture, is just to give it a try making it. Anyway, so definitionally, that's sort of the long version. The short version, the one that I often give to people who are just kind of asking to be polite and they don't really care, is that a zine is basically like a handmade DIY booklet or pamphlet. Maniac. Hurry up. I'm going to talk very briefly on zine history. And mostly I'm going to talk about it because I kind of disagree with the most common narrative about zine history. One of the most common narratives that you'll hear is that the word zines comes from the word fanzines and is a shortening of that word. And the word fanzines was used to describe publications that were made by fans of fantasy and science fiction serials starting in about the 1940s. And therefore zines are said to have started in the 1940s. I love those, but I personally find this narrative to be incorrect. The way that we tend to define zines is similar to the way that I've defined them, I think, is that we think of them as handmade, DIY, small-run publications, pamphlets, and books that are made for cheap, easy, and quick, relative to books, cheap, easy, and quick distribution. And if we're going to use that definition for zines, I think it doesn't make sense to say that they started in the 1940s, because we definitely have demonstrated versions of zines that were around before then. You could talk especially about the history of political and revolutionary zines and of art books and zines. People will talk about chapbooks and other sorts of pamphlets that were made very similarly, that basically fill that definition of being a DIY small batch run of content to, have the purpose of reaching a wider audience. And I think that you could more quickly than you would books. And I think that you could definitely make that argument that those sorts of things have been around at least since the invention of the printing press, if you want to make something being printed a requirement. But yeah, I think it's kind of silly to say that zines started specifically in the 1940s as a result of this word. Perhaps the word zines started being used in that way, but what we know as zines and what we today would call zines have been around for a very long time before that. Really, though, it's kind of silly and pointless to try and come up with a single moment or a single time in which zines began, and there's definitely a lot of fluidity between what you would call a zine or what you wouldn't call a zine. And, my whole purpose in making that argument that they've been around for a long time is because zines are ever evolving. And that is the primary takeaway that I want to make here, is that zines have been around for a very long time, and they are ever evolving alongside culture. They haven't gone anywhere. They aren't some relic of 1980s punk band culture, although they certainly had their presence there. Zines are a very consistent part of small press history. And so if you are interested in making your own, you will be in very good company. Maniac. Hurry up. Another important component of zines are the cultural elements that have been built up around it. I think zines definitely have a zine culture, and so I think by learning a little bit more about that, it sort of helps to clarify in your mind what zines are, in a sense, and what they allow you to do. One major component is free expression. Zines, unlike many other published works and forms of publication, are a means of intellectual, creative, and personal expression that aren't regulated by anything. They are not regulated by some sort of editor or industry. Perhaps individual zines are run by editors, but it's not run by a company, it's not run by an industry, and in general, there are very few, if any, expectations about what a zine is, what it looks like, what it should contain, what the formatting should be, really anything like that. The core of zines really is about freedom of expression in every aspect of zine making. I think part of that is why it's so hard to nail down a definition for what zines are, is because the freedom of expression is such a core part of zine culture. Another core component of zine culture is DIY style. And I suppose what I'll say is that in as much as there is a large freedom of expression for what a zine might contain, there's also a large freedom into what it actually looks like. And so things like typos and sketchiness and grunginess and punkiness, copy streaks, and all of these sorts of things are absolutely welcome, loved, and accepted in the zine community. You can make it look as fancy and polished and commercial that's as you want to. Commercial is sort of a weird word, but the idea is that because the primary purpose and for much of this is about expression and sharing and freedom, then there really aren't a lot of expectations for what it would look like. And even elements of zines such as legibility kind of are not very important. This is why zine making, in my opinion, is so accessible, and what makes it so easy and such a great thing to get into is because it truly does not matter what your zine looks like. And in fact, I think part of the imperfections that someone might see, that's sort of what makes zines fun, is the imperfections. So a DIY style, having it look very handmade, feel very handmade, is definitely part of the appeal of zines, and it's deeply entrenched in zine culture. Another big component of zine culture is creative exchange. A big component for many people is not just the act of creating zines, but also sharing them with others, of reading other people's zines and having your zine be read. There's a really big community of zine trading and sharing and swapping and generally making zines accessible in many ways, as opposed to seeing them kind of purely as like a product. So basically, if somebody is asking to trade zines, then that is a zinester's way of saying hello and saying that they appreciate your work and that they are interested in it and that they'd like to swap. It's not meant as a devaluing of the work or anything. That's just kind of what zinesters do, is that they very often will trade with each other. You are not obligated to trade, and you are also not obligated to share your zine at all. If you want to use a zine making as more of a personal expression and you just kind of keep it to yourself and don't photocopy at all, I think that's fine. I think that still counts as a zine if you want it to. If you declare it to be a zine, then yeah, totally. That's what you're doing. But in zine culture as a whole, the idea of creative exchange and sharing is very prevalent. And finally, another really important and relevant part of zine culture is creator privacy and self-description. So basically, the right of creators to describe and share only as much about themselves as they want to, either in their zine or in the way that it's shared. Many zines, over a long period of time, have been made and shared anonymously, And having this right to share information anonymously is actually a really important draw for many people to be able to create zines and to be able to create especially things like protest zines or informational zines that are sharing information that are perhaps society doesn't want to be shared. This sort of component of the capability to be anonymous if one wants to is a really big part of this underground element of zines, and this ability for people to be safe and continue sharing zines and get information that's really important out there. So basically, within zines, you absolutely do not have to identify yourself or share any information about yourself you don't want to. You don't have to include any information in your zine about where or when it was printed if you don't want to. You may just kind of for your own sake, if you're making a per zine and you're like, oh, I want to be able to look back in this and know that this is sort of who I was in October of 2025. But it's definitely not a requirement. And if you would feel more comfortable using a pen name or no name at all on your zine, then that is completely valid and very common. Also, just as a bit of a heads up, as part of respecting zine culture, is that if you know information about a zine creator that they did not share expressly in their zine or in the way that they've distributed, then keep that to yourself. Don't go around saying, oh yeah, this is zine, which has no name on it anywhere or any attachment to the person who made it. That was made by my best friend from high school. It's like, just leave it alone. This right to creator privacy and self-identification is a really important part of zine culture.
Hurry up.
As the final component for part 1, the basics section, I want to talk about some different zine categories that you might put zines into. Zines are notoriously difficult to categorize because they are so diverse in their content and in their artistic styles and artistic expression, in their mediums, just in so many different ways that it can be really hard to come up with categories that are relatively complete, that feel like they can encompass enough zines that nothing really gets left out. There's so much that goes into coming up with category systems. I'm a librarian, and so I've actually done zine librarianship specifically of trying to organize zines before, and so I've come up with this way of categorizing that I think it makes sense, and I think it works pretty well, but it is most certainly not the only way of categorizing. I think it just provides a little bit more context of trying to make sense of what zine you might want to make, and that's kind of the point of this whole thing. So I have broken down zines into 4 main categories based on the primary purpose of that zine. And sometimes it can be hard to tell what the purpose of a zine is, but I think that these are pretty intuitive. I think these work pretty well. So I break it down into instructional zines, informational zines, artistic zines, and per zines, or personal zines. So we'll go through each one of those. Instructional zines I define as zines with the primary purpose of teaching the reader how to do something. It is about instructing the reader, instructional zines. So some of the things that you might find in this category are DIY instructions, workbooks, activist safety, tutorials for navigating life or navigating bureaucracy, recipe zines, anything that is sort of has the primary purpose of being an instruction on how to do something. For each of these, I'll show an example zine that I have made. All of these are downloadable on my itch.io page for free, so you can get a closer look and sort of see how they might fit into that category, maybe get some inspiration. So for this one, my example zine is You Should Be Questioning, a guide to questioning your gender. And so you can kind of tell right from the title, it is a guide on how to question your gender. That is the purpose of it. As you can see, it is a sort of brochure style zine, brochure shaped. So, as we were saying, sort of the shape and style and the means of expression don't necessarily change what category it's in this system. And the how-tos here are things like, here are some myths about gender, here are some activities that you can go through to question your gender. It's meant kind of as a tutorial, and that's why it is an instructional zine. The next category is informational zines, and these are zines with the primary purpose of sharing nonfiction information. Sort of like it's like a general nonfiction category, but not including the instructional zines. So some things in this category are feminism zines, fanzines. They are sharing information about something that they are a fan of. Queer history, mental and sexual health advice, music and bands, reviews, science, political zines. All of these things absolutely can count as informational zines because their primary purpose is sharing nonfiction information. I count reviews as that because they are sharing their opinions. These don't necessarily have to be 100% factual nonfiction information, but it's nonfiction as opposed to like a primarily personal expression. That's where it can get a little bit tricky. But, I think in general, informational zines makes sense as a category. The example that I have for that here is Take a Rest, a list of restful activities. You could say that this is kind of an instructional zine, but it's really talking more about concepts of rest and different types of rest. So that's why I put it into an informational zine, is because it's more about getting information about types of rest. So in this zine, I talk a little bit about the establishment of the concept of different types of rest, as I've referenced throughout the zine, and then what each category of rest, physical rest, mental rest, social rest, etc., might look like. And I also have, Zen koan in here, and so that's sharing something that, it's not for the sake of personal expression, it's sharing something else. Anyway, so this is an example of what I would call an informational zine. Artistic zines are, not to say that other zines are not artistic, but I call them zines with the primary purpose of creative expression by the authors. And so some things that you'll see in this category, and what I tend to categorize it as, art books, illustrations, fan fiction, fictional comics, like, comic books, literary zines, poetry zines, photography zines, things that are gathering, and they're sharing artistic creations, artistic expression. The zine itself is meant as an artistic expression. I basically think of this as like the fiction category in a very general sense. So by this category, one could still have a zine that is considered an informational zine that is a comic. So the comic is sort of like the medium of expression, but you could say, well, I'm making a comic about, the history of, something. A comic about the history of feminism. A comic about the history of something, but, it wouldn't go into artistic expression necessarily, it would go to informational, because the fact that it's a comic is the way in which it is expressing the purpose, which is to teach about the history of whatever. So that's kind of where I make the distinction. Whereas another type of comic maybe purely it's a fictional story that someone is making, and so that could go in there. I actually had a comic as my main example that I include in my written version of this, which is a comic that I have made, but I actually ran out of copies of that. So instead I'll just show off Cat Magic, and this is a little mini zine I've made that is literally just a little collection of doodles of cats, drawings, artistic expression. Easy peasy. And then finally, my very favorite category of all, perzines, or personal zines. These are zines that, the way that I define it, zines with the primary purpose of self-understanding and self-expression by the author or authors. So some things that you might see in this category are diaries, and that would include diary comics would go in this. Musings, travel zines, like reflections on travel that someone had. Queer or identity experience zines, ones that aren't necessarily about here's some information about queer history, but here's my expression as a queer person or my experience as a queer person. Zines about personal associations with a topic, with any topic. If the idea is that it's about personal expression, I would call it a perzine. I love perzines. I'm obsessed with perzines, and I make a lot of perzines. The example that I picked here is part of my perzine series, Unfair Maiden. And this is Unfair Maiden number 3, the Homecoming issue. And this issue is all about sort of the theme of homecoming. That's the theme keyword that I used. And so I have a variety of things that are sort of, it's a very diverse set of expression. It's some of it's text, some of it's collage. All the pages look very different from each other, but they are all created with the purpose of personal expression. And the subject in this case is sort of around the theme of home, homecoming, what home means, just, associations with that topic. And it doesn't necessarily, a perzine doesn't necessarily have to have associations with a particular topic. But I thought this was a good example because it's not necessarily a super obvious topic that you would think of, like this is a diary. I suppose you could call it a diary. I don't know. This is what I mean. It's so hard to categorize zines. Point is, perzines is an overall umbrella. Zines with the primary purpose of self-understanding and self-expression. And there you go. Those are my 4 categories, and then a few examples of what might be in each of those categories, and common zines that you might see in each category. So hopefully that provides a little bit of a roadmap as to the different type of zines that are out there. And with any luck, it gives you a little bit of inspiration and a few ideas about a zine that you might want to make. If you have a particular purpose or a particular thing you want to express, a personal thing, do you want to teach people how to do something? Do you want to share knowledge that you have about something? Do you want to just create art and use it as an art piece? Maybe these categories can sort of help you, pick your focus. And once again, the focus doesn't have to be exclusively any particular one of these. You can do any or all of these things in a single zine as well. So that's it for this first video, for part 1 on the basics of zines, zine history, zine culture, and a few different types of zines out there. I hope that you are inspired and excited, and the next video, or the next portion of this guide, which once again is available in a written version on my website, the next portion is talking about zine inspiration, and we'll get a little bit more into detail about different zine topics. We'll get into some ideas for different mediums, different modes of expression that you can use in your zine, and then after that we'll get to the actual making part. All right, hope to see you then. Bye-bye.